If you don't have conviction in what you're doing, wow, that's going to be discouraging because you're like thinking they don't believe in this. Why should I? But if you come into that and you have so much conviction that what you're building is valuable, then you can leave that call and say, they're lost. I think though that this is like the most exciting time to launch a company and be an entrepreneur. With AI tools, the barriers to entry for software products as a whole has gotten so much lower.
Welcome into MPods. We're here with Jonah, Liss right now from MeetYourClass. We're super excited, so let's just jump right in. So, Jonah, could you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do at MeetYourClass?
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Jonah Liss. I'm a now senior at the University of Michigan, and for the past 2 years or so, I've helped co-found and have been serving as the COO of a startup called MeetYourClass. In an early stage startup of this size, I wear a lot of hats, so it kind of started out as everything but software development, and now it's kind of becoming a little bit more specialized into like the operations and sales. But you know, it's like back up a little bit. MeetYourClass, it's a platform for students to meet each other before they come to college. So when you're a senior in high school and you've started to apply to schools, you can sign up for the platform and you can see everyone else who's in the same situation as you. So the other people applying to that school and then eventually who have been admitted and who have committed to the school.
So then with the problem of looking at enrollment in universities, how did you first identify the problem that you wanted to address, and what was the story like to get started with MeetYourClass?
Yeah, so it was actually a little bit of an accident. So for starters, our ambitions, I wouldn't say were as high. Initially, the idea was to make a better roommate finder. We thought that was a pretty big issue when we came to campus. So we created this platform for students to be able to find roommates, and it slowly started broadening to now you can find friends and you can chat. But after around a year or so of building, we were really focusing our efforts on building communities and amassing a large user base at, let's just say, like the 300 biggest universities. Where our evolution started was we actually had a school that was not in one of the 300 biggest schools that we weren't really addressing. It was called the Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences in Cincinnati, Ohio. And one of their directors reached out to us and said, like, hey, I see what you guys have been doing at like the University of Michigan and Michigan State and UNC and FSU and all these other really large institutions. Could you make a community for us by any chance? So we did that and we started working with the school, and what we realized was that the reason they were so eager to have a community was not for the sake of making it so their incoming students could find roommates better. I mean, that was a part of it, but really the value that they saw was that they thought it could be an enrollment driver. So basically they thought that a tool like MeetYourClass could be implemented to students, and that through it existing and students being able to like find their community and friends and roommates, that they would then be more likely to attend the school come the fall.
Okay, so that's a big value driver then for the university, because if you can increase enrollment by X percent, then you can increase the amount of tuition that they receive and also the amount of post-graduation donations that they have too. So that's a very big value driver. Is that the business model, or what's the business model look like for MeetYourClass?
Right now, the primary business model is that we get into annual contracts with the university's admissions or enrollment department. And the ultimate goal is, like, as you mentioned, to enroll X percent more students, because that way there's so much more tuition dollars. And, so 90% of universities are what we would call tuition dependent, which means like the majority of their revenue comes from people paying them tuition dollars. That's the primary service that most schools are providing. A lot of the larger institutions, there's some exceptions, like At U of M, this should probably be fact checked, but I think only around like 15% of revenue or so comes from tuition. And then a lot comes from the endowment, from athletics. I think actually the majority of revenue, shockingly, comes from the hospital system. So that's crazy. But the majority of schools, there's around like 4,000 in the US, are tuition dependent. So they need to pay for solutions to recruit more students. And part of the reason this has become a really pressing issue is that in 2007, 2008, when the Great Recession hit, less people started having kids. So now we're like 17 years removed from that or so, and there's less people who are even of the age to which they could go to college. So if you just kept the college going rate steady, inherently a lot of schools would have high vacancy rates. And since they're dependent on tuition, they have all of these fixed costs. They have these large libraries and tenured professors. So they need to invest in solutions to get more people to show up. So we help aid in that process.
And then, so could you describe, if there was a single moment that you knew, okay, this is going to be a big thing, like people are signing up, was there a single moment that you knew that, or was it more of a gradual shift towards this is a serious thing that I want to contribute? If there was, could you describe that moment?
Well, okay, I would say internally we're optimists.
Yeah.
We were always really confident because there are currently solutions and companies that approach universities and they say, hey, I have a platform for people to meet each other before they come to campus. And it's been proven that systems like that drive enrollment. And we, being optimistic and very confident in our product, we always believed that we were going to be successful in that space because we have so much conviction in our product relative to the incumbents. So there's already companies that sell solutions like this to schools. And they've established themselves in the market. But now we've come in, it started in 2022, and we made a new look on a platform, and we got student adoption before approaching universities. And we know that students like it because we had thousands of students signing up without spending any money on marketing. So once we saw this new use case of selling to universities, we knew that it would just take time, marketing, and sales in order to be successful. But that's internally. Externally, I'd say the biggest validation was, I mentioned we started working with that school called the Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences around August or September, I want to say, of this year. So what's that, only like 5 months ago or so? We got, or less than 4 months ago, we got data back because we were developing a case study with them, and we found really positive enrollment metrics. So we looked at students who used MeetYourClass versus students who didn't use MeetYourClass, and we were able to extrapolate that we saved them at a minimum, not saved, but at a minimum added around $830,000 to their top line revenue.
Wow.
So for us, that was the validation. I think externally that really helped us and has kind of like aided us in selling to more and more schools.
So finding that success early on was crucial to your confidence in building out the rest of MeetYourClass, in that you found, I saved them this amount of money, I did the math, and this has value to other schools and organizations.
That's the external validation. I think that's where, like, if you were a VC investor or another university, you would look at this and say, okay, now this is legit. But internally, we were always very gung-ho on the vision that we had so much conviction in our vision for that. Prior to us, the majority of players in this space and solutions for people to meet before coming to campus are what we now call the third-party application. At U of M, they were investing in a tool that was called, like, I believe, like the Wolverine Life app. Or, there's like websites that the housing department might send you to that, they say like, okay, this is a place you can find roommates. So those systems, they're way better than nothing. Like, it's great that the school is investing in them. But what we saw was that even though the school was investing in tools like this, these like third-party applications, we call them third-party because they're detached from social media. So even though the school was hosting this website or paying for this app, basically our entire grade was on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been a trend that's been going on really since Facebook's been founded. Like, people turn to social media to make those connections. That's where your entire network already is. So the reason we thought we were so differentiated and why we had that conviction was because we built a platform that built on top of those tools and integrated with social media. So that way it wasn't just like a separate system that the school says, hey, go meet people on the Wolverine Life app or like roommates.umich.com. It was like, go to UMich incoming students on Instagram, and that's the place where you'll meet. So that's the trail we were going down.
Yeah, no, definitely. I use some of the third-party apps to come into Michigan when I started. They were not good. I messaged a few people, and it was, I mean, you sort of couldn't have a very dynamic profile on the app. There's maybe a few things that you could do, but yeah, I use those, and definitely I wish I knew about MeetYourClass back then. So
that wasn't a thing yet, but there were like the Instagram groups. Like, I think for us it was UMich 2025, and that's how me and my co-founder like actually initially met, was through that page.
Meet the students where they are.
Yeah.
And then so MeetYourClass is backed by JP Morgan and Techstars, and I'm curious, so what advice would you give to other startup founders about finding incubators or investors?
JP Morgan's a bit indirect because they were the investor in Techstars.
Okay.
The sole investor for the Detroit cohort, which we went through. I would say at our stage, it was extremely helpful. I mean, we were approaching universities and whatnot with this idea, and we were just sophomores in college at the time. So having like Techstars backing us was very powerful. I would say though, especially with the rise of like AI tools and online education, I would urge people who like have ideas or are launching startups to like not go into an incubator or lean into that until you really think you need it, and where you think you've like you need extra connections and you've kind of like expended all of the resources you can find online. Because at the end of the day, Techstars, again, it was great credibility, but everything we learned through that program we could learn online. And that information's becoming more and more structured over time, like YC as like a startup school. And then also in terms of the connections, I've been shocked just how open people are to like having conversations. Like, if you send someone a LinkedIn DM or an email and you like genuinely put a lot of thought into it, I think people usually like will reciprocate, because everyone was helped earlier in their careers. So people, I think, like to pay it back. Usually on the startup side of things, like other founders and their willingness to like help us out, I've been really surprised by. A lot of that just came from like just cold outreach and not being afraid of them not responding.
A lot happens when you just forget about, like, there's nothing negative that's going to happen if you do a cold outreach to someone. There's
worst case scenarios, they read the header for 2 seconds and it goes to the trash.
Back to MeetYourClass. So what's your long-term vision for MeetYourClass, and where do you guys want to be in the future, maybe five years out?
Yeah, so I'm like a 5-year time frame. I think it's primarily focused on this core product that we have. So to put some numbers to this, the kind of issue of students graduating high school as seniors and then deciding that they don't want to go to college or that they're not going to like select that institution, we have market sized that to, at a minimum, I really cannot emphasize the minimum enough because we looked at all the floor kind of like estimations, estimate to be an $11 billion revenue leakage to the higher education industry. So over these next 5 years, we have a core product that we think, the same way we added the $830,000 of revenue to the Christ College's top line, we think that there's a path to now partner with hopefully all 4,000 or so universities with this core product and help them with this issue of high school seniors deciding college isn't for them. Because we think not everyone should go to college. That's a whole separate conversation. But you see especially low rates of people not going to college if they come from a high school where no one else is going to school, or they'd be first generation, their parents didn't go to college, so they just don't know how to navigate that process. So over the next 5 years, we want to bring this software to way more schools. After that, there's kind of like two paths we can go down that I wouldn't say are mutually exclusive, and both are in the higher education space. The one path is you march further in the direction of graduation, because there's huge revenue leakages also once students get on campus. Right now, retention rates, so like, people not staying for like a second, third, fourth year of graduating, that costs the system $27 billion per year. I think a lot of people are surprised by that, because at U of M, the graduation rate is 97%. Nationally, it's hovering closer to like 64%. So, that's around 40% of students who are starting a degree and they're dropping out. And, in my opinion, that's, as I said, a lot of people shouldn't go to college in the first place, but if you're starting the degree and you're oftentimes like taking out debt to start it, to drop out, you're not usually getting better career prospects. So I think that there's a lot of good that like a company like MeetYourClass could do, extending further in the student life cycle and trying to decrease those dropout rates. The other route is there's a whole lot of other tools within the admissions department that we can potentially like attach ourselves to. So right now the core product is helping students meet, but there's so many like administrator tools and housing tools that we think, since we're the first touch point for students, we can make for a smoother experience where like instead of signing up for MeetYourClass to meet your classmates, but then like paying your tuition elsewhere, or locking in your roommate pairing in the housing software, or like registering for your classes, like we think a lot of that can be consolidated.
Yeah, integration, definitely. That's a good tool.
Yeah, so I have a question which is not on the list, but I'm curious, since MeetYourClass is targeting like high school students, seniors who are going to college. So how do you guys like do the product marketing to target specifically these users?
Yeah, so it comes through two different avenues. Primarily, it's through social media itself, but we don't place advertisements. Since we integrate with social media, we are the community that people land on. So as an example, say you're on Instagram. We will set up a group for incoming students at a given college. We have a group for incoming students on our own platform, but we'll also set up a group for incoming students at that college. Now from Instagram, there's so many ways that group can get in front of you. You might just go to the search bar and look up groups for incoming students at UMich, and it will pop up. But it also might get in your feed because, I don't know how the algorithm of like as like a $1 trillion company works, but it's pretty good at recognizing like you might be interested in this group. So sometimes it just gets pushed to you. But then also you might see your friend on the group. So your friend might like join the group and then post to their story about it. So all of those are kind of like funnels to get people into the group, and then from there they're part of the MeetYourClass ecosystem. But the other big way, and what we're kind of pushing for more now, is if we partner with a university, they will oftentimes send like a text or like an email blast to every single person at a given stage. So like sometimes it's just every single person who might be considering the school, but usually it's like once you get admitted, you get your acceptance letter. It'll be in the footer of the acceptance letter. Join MeetYourClass. This is where you can find your community.
Yeah, so the next question is, since AI, artificial intelligence, is becoming more and more advanced, so do you see any like potential opportunities or risks for student networking or for MeetYourClass?
Yeah, so I think it goes both ways. Where I am really concerned is that I think with AI, higher education is going to change so much that higher education may just be less valuable. Like, you guys are like familiar with Chegg, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
So like here's a company that was like initially selling to schools. They eventually shifted to being like a place where you could get answers to your homework problems. Now the stock's basically in the ground because you don't need it. Like, you can go on these large language models and learn just about anything. And you can go on Coursera and like learn the live streams of like MIT lectures are on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like somewhat scary, at least for like MeetYourClass. Is like, you know, part of the reason school might buy into MeetYourClass is that enrollment's declining, but if so many less people are deciding they're going to go to college, a lot of institutions are going to shut down and there's going to be a lot of consolidation. So that's not necessarily good. But that's at like a very mile-high view. I think on a lower level, a lot of the AI and automation has actually been good for our business because in terms of an introduction into school, it's very authentic. So with AI, there have been a lot of companies that are popping up and they're helping schools use AI to automatically call students and act as the admissions counselor, to like spam them with emails. I think there's a lot of value in that stuff, but I think it just creates even more of a void in terms of like, there's a bit more of like a disconnect from the school. Mm-hmm. So since we have like a mechanism to make it so you basically feel like you're on campus prior to being there, I think that's going to lead to like more opportunities.
And then, yeah, following up on artificial intelligence tools, we're at a very, very interesting time. I know DeepSeek just came out, and I know
I love it.
It's competing, and there's Anthropic, and there's this. We don't know what's going on with the AI large language models right now, and there's so much ambiguity. And also, companies like MeetYourClass can develop their product core offerings. You don't need to hire as many engineers to work on products, and you can be leaner as a startup. How are you viewing these tools and using them to your business?
You know, it's a bit outside my expertise. We use them a ton internally. We haven't been hiring less developers, but our developers are so much more productive. So right now we have like 4 or so developers relative to the standards from like 5-10 years ago. It might feel like, I don't know, I wasn't launching a startup that long ago, but maybe it feels like we have 20 right now.
Yeah.
I think though that this is like the most exciting time to launch a company and be an entrepreneur. With AI tools, the barriers to entry for software products as a whole has gotten so much lower. And in one lens, you know, that means that if you conceptualize an idea, you might have like slightly smaller of a moat because someone else can also develop it a lot quicker. But I think more people should just be creating and building and being entrepreneurial. So I think it's allowing so many more people to do it. Like, you don't have to go to like a U of M, and this is feeding into the whole like not needing to go to college thing as much. But like, you don't have to go to U of M and like take your 4 years of courses and get a master's to be able to like bring your idea to life. And I think that's amazing, and it's just leading to so much more exciting technology coming out that's, I think, going to make most people's lives better.
That's a hot take on education. Also, wouldn't it be contrary to the business model of MeetYourClass if people were to stop going to university as much as they otherwise would have been? Even though university might not be the case for, you might not need to go to university for everybody. Need.
I mean, okay, I think for one, the whole idea of like 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds going to college, it's so much bigger than us. So I think whatever happens is going to happen, and we're just going to be a piece of that puzzle. I think in the short term, if less people are into college, again, there's like a lot of opportunity for a company like MeetYourClass, because as is being seen with this demographic cliff from 07, 08, when less people were having kids, you know, a lot of these colleges, they're not just going to shut down because they're facing a bad year, but they have all of these fixed costs to hit. So they need to spend more time enrolling students. And even if there's less college-age students, or a subset of students is deciding they don't need to go to college because they can learn everything online, there's still way more people in the US and the world that could be filling those seats. I think, for one, I think a lot of institutions are going to need to like also fill out the seats with international students, because if there's less college age students in the US, there's still a lot of demand abroad for those education services. But then also, as I mentioned, only like 35-40% of students or like high school seniors are going to go on to like get a college degree. So there's still opportunity to fill that white space. And again, I think if you're looking at like that 60% of students or so, there's going to be some of them who aren't going to college because of AI and online education. But I think the much like more blaring issue from my seat and how I see it is it's more of like a lack of like resources or understanding of how to like navigate the college education process.
Yeah. So as you mentioned before, like for Czech, it has some like unexpected use cases since some students will just look up the answers of their homework on it. So like for MeetYourClass, are there any like unexpected use cases that happen in the platform?
Yeah, we have had a handful of people approach us and say that they met their boyfriend or girlfriend off of the platform. So I think that was unexpected. But the biggest thing, at least from where we started, is the fact that this could be an enrollment driver and it could be a tool that administrators want to use. We've been very surprised here that like a lot of schools, even if they don't partner with MeetYourClass, are still looking at our communities to like gauge, how am I doing on my enrollment numbers? How are people excited to come to campus? What sort of questions are they asking? We had no idea that was going to happen, so that was a complete surprise.
Yeah, that's a funny use case that is very nice that people are doing that too. And
dating.
Yeah, with MeetYourClass, but yeah, it's inspiring to see that people are finding other use cases for MeetYourClass. If you have any other questions or things to ask, or
Okay, I will have one more question.
Yeah.
So I know that MeetYourClass is now currently only in the States. Do you guys have any ideas to be more internationally, like collaborate with high schools, like for example in China?
Yeah.
To have more like user cases for international students?
Yes, I absolutely think we should be exploring more international markets. Like, I mean, for one, improving the process of international students coming to U.S. institutions, but also just potentially partnering with schools outside of the U.S. I think we're just like too far away from that as a company. Like, you know, as a startup, it's just so important to stay focused. So we're only at 11 universities. Once we hopefully get to like 1,000, 2,000, and we're like saturating this market with our product that we know we can sell to them, we're absolutely going to look to expand more outside of the U.S. It's just probably going to take like a few years, but I think, you know, I was talking about like horizontal expansion within higher ed. That's the other thing I probably should have mentioned, is like providing more value to international students coming to the U.S. and hopefully working with schools outside of the U.S. as well.
I was curious on another aspect. So I feel like we didn't hit too much on the problems that you've encountered throughout MeetYourClass, and I'm sure there must have been many. And I'm curious, could you walk us through the difficult moments of MeetYourClass and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I will say I think we had like a unique entrepreneurial journey in the sense that when we started this company, we were college students, and we were like very fortunate that we didn't have to pay ourselves. I can't even imagine how many more roadblocks there would have been if we were not in a position where we didn't need to pay ourselves for 2 years, because it meant we could just grow so deliberately. Like, we didn't make that first hire or the second hire or the third hire until we had absolute certainty that we would have recurring revenue. So there was so much less stress because there weren't those financial issues. But I will say it's a very discouraging journey in the sense that, like, across everything from investors to, especially in sales, to trying to hire people, you hear like a million more no's than yeses. It's just no after no after no after no. So, you know, I mentioned we're optimistic. We have so much conviction about what we're doing. That's what's allowed us to keep going. But, you know, on a day-by-day basis, it's pretty tough, or it's been tough. So it's been exciting. I think, like, when we got that case study with the Christ College, that was like the biggest breakthrough, because now when we were talking to university administrators on like a sales call, or we were like applying to speak at conferences, we just had so much more credibility. And instead of it being a no 99% of the time, now it might be a no 50% of the time. And those are a lot better odds. So, yeah, it was very difficult to get through those first couple of years where it was nonstop no's, though.
Okay, so if you're saying advice to people who are in the situation of they've got a startup and they keep pitching their startup and they keep hearing the no after no after no, and they're in that space, what would you say to them?
I would like to be like super positive and just say like no you got, but like the reality of like startups, I mean it is that you're just gonna hear no after no after no. Like you kind of have to have tough skin. But I might retract my statement a bit. I think actually the biggest thing is you just have to believe in yourself and have conviction that what you're doing is right. Because let's say you're on a sales call and they say no. If you don't have conviction in what you're doing, wow, that's going to be discouraging because you're like thinking they don't believe in this. Why should I? But if you come into that and you have so much conviction that what you're building is valuable, then you can leave that call and say, their loss. If I were in their shoes, I would have signed up. Maybe you wouldn't be correct. Maybe if you were in their shoes, they shouldn't sign up. But at least like you're able to keep your head higher and things get better over time because the product gets more developed. You get more testimonials. You get more case studies. You get more, just so much more validity. So you just need to have conviction. And if you don't believe in the core of what you're building, you might need to like someone to kind of like shift that idea a bit. In the earliest stages, you should have conviction when you're saying, wow, I'm like kind of running in circles right now. But you have to be flexible. So you need to believe in the core of your idea. So for us, the core of the idea was that students should not be meeting on a third-party app. They want to be on social media. We had so much conviction in that even when the product wasn't great, and wow, we had to make a lot of pivots to like actually make it so those platforms could be like enterprise grade. We had that conviction, so we were able to keep going. But we really believed in the core. So, yeah, you kind of have to be flexible in the face of no's, but take the advice, but still believe in the core.
And have that conviction in your product and the underlying idea.
In the core of it, yeah. Your version 1, version 2, version 3 of the product is not going to be the final version. It should always change over time. So, you have to like acknowledge the no's and like see why did they say that. But in order to like stay optimistic, as long as you believe that like with enough time and development it'll get to the place it needs to be at, I think.
Okay.
That's fine.
I think that's a great place to end it. If there's where can people go to learn more about Meet Your Class? Are you currently hiring or are you currently seeking VC money?
We're actually exploring both. So we don't have any deliver hiring plans, but we're always open to like talented. We have some extra room for if like someone talented with a lot of passion comes along, and we'll always take a call. And then for VCs, we're not fundraising right now, but we're planning to in around like a bit over a year from now is the plan. I'm sure that might change. Maybe it'll be sooner, maybe it'll be later, but we're open to conversations. If you want to get in touch with us, please just reach out to us on LinkedIn, or our emails are our first name, so mine's Jonah, Jonah, at MeetYourClass Inc.
All right, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Jonah.
Thank you so much for having me.